I have a next door neighbor who is the epitome of a miserable old bastard. He's the kind of neighbor who spends more time scanning the block for code violations than he does minding his own business. If your car is parked an inch too far from the curb, he's on the phone with the city. If your grass is even slightly taller than regulation height, he's calling the HOA. He lives to make life harder for everyone else, simply put. But what really turned my stomach about this guy wasn't his petty obsession with the rules. It was the way he treated his German Shepherd. This poor dog was never inside the house. Never. Day or night, rain or shine, he was chained to a rusted metal post in the middle of this guy's unkempt yard. The chain gave him maybe 5-6 feet of movement in any direction, if that. The dog didn't have shelter, didn't even have a blanket to lie on. There was a small plastic bucket out there for water, but it was constantly tipped over or bone dry. I lost track of how many times I filled it myself, at least a few times a week, and sometimes daily during the hotter months. The dog was thin, skittish, and looked utterly defeated. You could see it in his eyes, like he had already given up hope. I had always felt bad for the pup, but then came the incident that nearly broke me. I was looking out my front window one morning when I saw it. The dog had gone to the bathroom near the walkway instead of in the patchy, weed-ridden grass. The old man stomped out of his house in a rage, yelling obscenities at the now terrified dog. He grabbed the pup by the sides of the head, lifted him completely off the ground, and hurled him straight through him against the porch wall. The sound of the dog slamming against the wood was sickening. The pup didn't even yelp. He just lay there for a moment, obviously stunned at what happened. Now, I don't remember consciously deciding to act. I just moved. I came out of my house, went around the side of his, and shouted at him through his locked gate. I told him if he ever laid a hand on that dog again, I'd call the police and animal control. He promptly told me to mind my own damn business before dragging the dog inside by the collar. This wasn't an interaction that I savored, but I knew then that I wasn't backing down. That evening, I decided I was going to take that dog away from him, no matter what it took. A friend of a friend runs a no-kill private shelter out on a farm about 90 minutes outside of the city. I called her up, explained the situation, and she said she'd be more than happy to take the dog in. No questions asked about where he came from. Just get him there, and she would take care of the rest. For the next few days, I watched. I waited. Every time that dog was out, I checked to see if the old man was home. When finally, one afternoon, I saw my chance. The old guy's car was gone. The dog was alone. So I grabbed my bolt cutters out of the garage and walked up the old man's driveway. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline and fury that had built up over the past few weeks. I clipped the padlock clean, opened the gate up, and whispered for the dog to come with me. He hesitated for maybe a half second. Then he ran straight into my arms, straight into the car, tail wagging wildly like he already knew he was being saved. The drive out to the farm was quiet. The pup didn't bark or whine. He just laid in the back seat with his head resting up against the window, watching the world go by. Once we got to the farm, the change in him was immediate. He jumped out of the car and took off across the open field, like he had been waiting his whole life for that exact moment. The woman who runs this place seemingly fell in love with him on the spot. She told me he could be the poster dog for resilience. Even after everything he had been through, he was still playful, still gentle, and still full of trust. On my way home, I kept thinking about how close he came to being broken beyond repair, and how easy it had been to stop it. All it took was one single person giving a damn. When I pulled back into my own driveway, the old man was now on his porch. He shouted at me, asking if I'd seen his dog. I didn't even look his way. "Nope," is all I said before walking inside with a smile creeping across my face. A couple days later, I heard from another neighbor of ours that the guy assumed that the dog had run away. Never once did he question how a chained-up dog could break a padlock and unlatch a gate. That's how little he cared. The shepherd is thriving now, gained weight, made a bunch of dog friends on the farm, and has a big barn that he sleeps in at night. He even has a new name that actually suits him. The thing about that guy, he may have noticed that the dog was gone, but I doubt he ever really missed him. I know this, if he ever gets another animal, I'll be ready to take that one too. And next time, I won't wait nearly as long. Animals can't speak for themselves, but if I can help even one escape a life like that, I will, every damn time. My story starts several years ago when I was still in nursing school. I used to be close friends with this girl. Let's call her Jackie. We were both in the same nursing program, and for the most part, we got along really well. We studied together, went out together, even pulled all-nighters cramming for exams and stress crying over clinicals. It was that kind of friendship that feels like a lifeline, especially while in a program like that. But things started to shift near the end of our first year. There was this guy that I had started to like. I talked about him with Jackie all the time. How sweet he was, how funny, how he walked me to class once when it was raining and I didn't even have to ask. It wasn't anything official at that point, but I was definitely catching feelings, and Jackie, she knew that. She even gave me advice about what to say to him and how to flirt without being so awkward. Then one night, out of nowhere, Jackie tells me that she hooked up with him. No warning, no preamble, just boom. Casual as hell, like it didn't even matter. I remember just sitting there, trying to hold my face still like I wasn't about to cry. I told her how hurt I was. She apologized and swore that it wouldn't happen again. Said that she didn't know I liked him that much, whatever that meant. I tried to let it go. I forgave, as best as I could. Fast forward a couple of years, and we're nearing graduation, finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. By that point, I'd been dating someone new for a couple of months. He wasn't perfect, but I really thought he cared about me. He was sweet, supportive, even brought me coffee before our clinical rotations. I was starting to think maybe I'd found someone worth trusting again. Well, one night, we're hosting a small pre-party at our apartment before heading to a bigger party on campus. Jackie and I still lived together. Awkward, I know, but the lease was the lease. And my boyfriend was over, hanging out like normal. We all headed out to the party together, and for all intents and purposes, it was a fun evening. We laughed, danced, had a few drinks. Nothing crazy, but I think everyone enjoyed their time. The end of the night was approaching, so Jackie found me and let me know that she was taking off. A few minutes later, the guy that I was with delivered the same message. I actually figured that he and Jackie would be walking back to campus together, since we had apartments nearly next to each other. I told him that I wasn't quite ready to call it a night, so I'd stay behind with the rest of my group. He said okay, gave me a kiss, and walked out the door. To this day, I don't know if it was the alcohol or the environment that didn't make me think twice about my best friend and boyfriend leaving nearly together. That was a big mistake on my part. When I got back to our apartment, less than a few hours later, all the lights were off. But as soon as I walked in the door, I heard the unmistakable sound of them in her bedroom. I didn't need to see anything. I knew. I froze for a second, completely stunned, and then quietly backed out of the apartment. I didn't want them to know that I had come back. I couldn't handle a confrontation. Not right then. I walked around the block in a daze until I felt calm enough to come back home like nothing had happened. I heard no more noise coming from her room, so I can only assume that my boyfriend, or soon-to-be ex, had already left at that point. I'm just gonna say that betrayal hit so hard. It wasn't even just about the guy. It was her. Again. I had trusted her after the first time. I let it slide. And now she did it again. This time with someone who I genuinely cared about. I was done, but instead of yelling or fighting with her, I started planning. At this point in our lives, we smoked a lot of weed. It was one of those casual, everyday habits that we didn't really think twice about. But after what happened, I quit. Cold turkey. And she kept on like normal, The difference was, I didn't tell her that I stopped. After graduation, we both moved back home, ironically just a few towns apart from each other. And we even started working at the same hospital. Different departments, but same building. She thought everything was great between us. I pretended like it was. I smiled, played nice, even hung out with her after work like nothing ever happened. But in the back of my mind, I knew what I was going to do. The hospital had a strict zero-tolerance drug policy. If you popped on a drug test, you were done. No questions asked. I kept encouraging her to keep smoking. I'd offered a roll for her. I'd bring snacks to make it more fun. I even faked smoking a few times myself, just to make it seem like I was still on board. I can honestly say, it didn't seem like she had a clue as to what was coming her way. After a couple of months, I left an anonymous note on our manager's desk. It was short, just one sentence. "Jackie is high now. You need to test her." Well, it must have worked because the same day, occupational health showed up and tested everyone on our unit. They had to make it look fair. But there was no warning, and if you left the building, you broke policy, and that was an automatic termination. Jackie texted me in a panic from the break room. I ran up to check on her, acting all surprised and concerned. I told her it was probably just a routine thing and nothing to worry about. She looked like she was going to throw up. I patted her on the back and said, "It'll be fine." It wasn't fine. A week later, Jackie was gone, fired on the spot for violating the hospital's drug policy. Apparently, once the results came back, there was no appeal process. And because of how strict New York's regulations were at the time, weed was still fully illegal then. She was blacklisted from pretty much every hospital within driving distance. I heard she tried applying to a few others nearby, but nothing ever came of it. Jackie ended up getting a job at a small clinic, basically a nurse receptionist combo role. And last I checked, she's making maybe a quarter of what we'd be making had she stayed in the hospital system. Her entire career path? Derailed. Do I regret it? Yeah, a little. I know it was extreme, and that she never actually came to work high. But I also remember how gut-wrenching it was to feel so betrayed, twice, by someone I trusted. Will I ever tell her what I did? Hell no. But is karma a bitch? Absolutely. And sometimes, you just have to help it along. When I was younger, I moved to Los Angeles with a dream, just like thousands of others. I wanted to make it big, to see my face on a screen, hear my name called at auditions, be someone. But I was one of the many who didn't make it. And this is what that looked like. I packed everything I owned into my beat-up car. I didn't have much back then. Some clothes, a few essentials, and just enough money to cover my first month's rent on a basement studio apartment that smelled like mold and had so many roaches that I named them out of spite. But it was mine, and I told myself the sacrifice would be worth it down the road. Before I left home, I worked as a bouncer. One of the guys I worked with gave me a number for an agency in LA that supplied security to bars and clubs. It wasn't exactly glamorous work, and the pay itself was garbage, but it was overnight hours, which meant I could chase auditions during the day and scrape by at night. I signed with a low-tier talent agency that made a lot of promises, but they told me they could get me on sets, get me in front of casting directors. I clung to their hope like a lifeline. But months passed and nothing came of it. Not a single gig. Rent got harder, and my optimism started to wear thin. Around this point, my car broke down, making it nearly impossible to get to auditions, to work, just about anywhere. That was my breaking point. Without a car, I couldn't make it to events, and without working security, I had no income. I started using Uber to get to my shifts, which would take some of my paycheck away. I'd work 6 hours and get paid barely enough to cover the ride back home. I did that for 2 weeks before realizing I was going broke faster by trying to survive. Auditions stopped. I wasn't focused on acting anymore. I was focused on eating. I was in survival mode. Every day was about calculating whether I could afford food or rent, and often it wasn't both. I finally called the manager at the staffing agency and told him everything. Told him I was out of options. He asked where I lived, then offered me a gig working the door at a gay bar across town. It was an hour walk or a half-hour drive, and like I said, I didn't have a car, but I said yes anyway. I didn't care anymore. I needed the cash. That job kept me in LA for another 3 years. The bar was small, mostly a dance floor and a DJ booth, with a mix of regulars and staff who were all chasing something. Fame, validation, maybe a way out. A lot of us were in the same boat. Broke actors, rejected dancers, people just trying to survive. There was a ton of drug use behind the scenes. Lines of coke in the bathroom, drinks before shifts, and I fell into it like it was gravity. It numbed the disappointment. It silenced that voice in my head screaming, "You failed." I worked the door with another guy, also a struggling actor. We got along, but he was different. Always flashing cash, dressed in designer stuff, driving a new BMW. It just didn't add up. We made the same money at the bar, so unless he was dealing or robbing banks, I just didn't get it. One night, I finally asked. When I did, he just laughed before saying the owner of this place is involved in adult films, mostly gay content online. He shoots and produces everything. I do a few scenes on the side, pays $2,000 a day, sometimes even more. I didn't know what to say to this. I was stunned. But then he hit me with, "They're always looking for guys like us. You want in?" I didn't answer, but I didn't say no either. The next day, I met the owner. He set me up with his agent, got me an appointment for STD testing, as well as waxing. I didn't pay a dime. They fronted everything. 2 weeks later, I was standing on a set, half naked, drugged out on Viagra, trying to remember how the hell I ended up here. It was supposed to be a group scene. They were going to pay me $500, but when the director saw me naked, he pulled me aside, asked me my measurements, and offered me $2,500 for a one-on-one scene instead. The other actor was a skinny guy, maybe 5'3". I'm 6'4" and built. I'd never been with a man before, but I needed the money, so I said yes. That one scene turned into 3 a week. The money was better than anything else I'd ever made, and paired with the drugs and alcohol, time blurred. By the end of this all, it didn't feel like 3 years. It felt like a lifetime. I told myself I was doing what I had to do, but every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the man staring back. I started to feel like a body for hire. I didn't feel like a person anymore, just something people used and paid for. And I willingly let them. I was lucky. I somehow avoided any diseases, but that was the only luck I had. Everything else about me deteriorated. My self-worth, my energy, my identity, gone. Eventually, I hit a wall. I couldn't do it anymore. I got clean, got sober, and I've been that way for a little over a year now. It's still hard. Some days are brutal, if I'm being honest. I'm still rebuilding. I'm still broke. Still trying to find a future, but I'm not selling myself anymore, and that has to count for something. I actually regret what I did. I regret how low I let myself go. I regret thinking so little of myself that I sold my body and buried my pain in coke and vodka. I don't say this to throw a pity party. I say it because maybe someone else is on the edge of that same cliff, and they need to hear this before they take the leap. One day at a time, that's how I'm doing it, and it's more than I'd ever thought I'd have. This felt good to finally say out loud. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I made a huge mistake, and I don't know how to make it right. About 5 hours ago, I went in for what I thought would be a normal massage. Now I'm sitting here staring at the clock, knowing my fiancée will be home soon, and knowing I have to tell her what happened. Let me start from the beginning. I booked a massage at this place not far from my office. From the outside, it looked perfectly respectable. Clean signage, professional website, nothing shady. I've been dealing with a lot of stress and tension lately and figured a massage might help. I wasn't thinking with anything but sore shoulders and a stiff neck. When I got there, the woman at the front counter gave me a brief smile. She walked me to a private room, handed me a towel, and told me to undress. She'll be back in 5 minutes, she said. I got on the table, covered up, and waited. The massage started off normally, mostly my back and shoulders, little pressure on the knots behind my neck. As the massage wore on, she eventually had me turn over, and she started to make her way from my shoulders down my arms to my midsection and to my thighs. I was tense, embarrassed even, because as she got lower, I could feel myself getting aroused. I didn't say anything, hoping that it would just be ignored. But then she casually removed the towel and just started, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Here's the thing, I didn't stop her. I froze, maybe for a second, maybe longer. I couldn't believe it was happening. And before I could really process how to react, it was over. I got dressed in silence, tipped her like an idiot, got in my car and drove home feeling sick. It wasn't until I was home and sitting at my kitchen table that I looked up the place's website again. That's when I saw it, clear as day, buried in one of the pages. Sensual massage available upon request. I hadn't asked for that. I didn't even know it was an option, but looking back, maybe I look like the type of guy who would. I'm 34, balding, a little overweight. Maybe she assumed that's what I came for. Now, that's not an excuse. I should have stopped her. I should have said something. Now I'm here, just hours away from seeing my fiancée, Claire. I keep running through what I'm going to say. I feel sick to my stomach because I know I've screwed up. I want to tell her because if roles were reversed, I'd want her to tell me. We've promised honesty. Real, painful honesty. Because we're building a life together. And I don't want this hanging over us. Update. I told her. It was short, and it hurt. Claire's first question to me was she pretty? I told her the truth. That she was a middle-aged woman who smelled like cigarettes and stale coffee. I wasn't attracted to her, and that somehow made it all worse. Then why didn't you stop her? Claire asked. I didn't really have a good answer. I just said I froze, and that's the truth. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it, but I also didn't stop it either. She looked like she was trying not to cry. Then she asked, "Are you not happy with me?" That one hurt the most. I told her she was perfect, that this wasn't about her. This was about me being in a situation and failing to act the way that I should have. That it wasn't her fault, that it never was. Claire didn't kick me out. She didn't scream. She said she wasn't breaking up with me. Not yet, in her words. She wanted to sleep on it. I offered to take the guest room. But even through pained eyes, she said, "Don't be dramatic." I spent the night feeling like garbage, because I am. If she'd have done this to me, I'd be devastated. But in my mind, she deserves to know, and I couldn't live with hiding it from her. Update. Probably the final one. We talked again this morning, briefly before she left for work. She told me we'd need to have a real conversation tonight. I braced myself for the worst. Before she left, I asked, "You think this is the beginning of the end?" She sighed and said, "No, I just need to understand why you didn't stop her." We talked about what we would have done if the roles were reversed. She said she would have stopped the guy. I told her I would have said the same thing, but that in practice, it's a bit more difficult than that. I wasn't expecting what happened, and I just failed. That's the only word for it. To my surprise, Claire was kind, still hurt, but understanding. She told me she doesn't feel like I cheated, not in the traditional sense, just that I did something incredibly stupid, and that right now she doesn't fully trust me, but she's not throwing away everything over one moment of stupidity. She said something that did stick with me. 'I almost wish you hadn't told me, but I'm still glad you did.' We both agreed that a marriage built on secrets isn't a real marriage at all. She texted me around lunchtime, told me she still loves me, that this doesn't define me, that if I ever find myself in a situation like that again, I need to stop it before it starts. I also did something I didn't plan to. I emailed the massage place from an old burner email address, told them what happened, told them they need to ask for consent, not just assume. They sent back a canned apology, claiming they're a legitimate business, but didn't really address what I said. Still, it felt like I needed to speak up. Now, that's where we're at. Not perfect, not broken either, just trying to move forward. I don't know what kind of person this makes me, but I know the kind I want to be, and that starts by owning my failure, as well as never letting this happen again.